Hello, everyone. I am Mia Hunt, Air Pollution Specialist and lead over the Locomotive Source category of the CARB Moyer Program with the Mobile Source Control Division. Today's public meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom. Following today's public meeting, we will post a video on our website. This meeting shall serve as the public meeting pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 44287B for CARB to consider public comments on the proposed amendments to the 2024 Moyer Program Guidelines prior to final adoption. The public comment period opened on January 2nd, and we will close February 16th, 2026. Before we go over some housekeeping items, I would like to introduce the staff here with us today. Marian Sandoval, Air Pollution Specialist and lead staff over Chapter 5 Off-Road Equipment. Vicki Hanks, Air Pollution Specialist and lead staff over Chapter 7 Marine Vessels. And Joshua Lowell, Air Pollution Specialist and lead staff over Chapter 9 Lawn and Garden Equipment Replacement. In addition, with us today, we also have Tess Sycat, Branch Chief over the Moyer Program, Sandra Nguyen, Manager over the Moyer Guideline Update, Derek Winters, Manager over the Off-Road Source categories, and Rhonda Runyon, Manager over Locomotives. We have disabled the chat function during this public meeting. If you'd like to submit public comments during the presentation, you may use the Q&A function throughout the meeting. We will address questions during the public comment session at the end of our presentation. And with that, we have finished housekeeping, and we will begin the presentation portion. We will begin today's agenda with an overview of the CARB Moyer Program, including its background and the goals for this public meeting. We will present proposed updates to the 2024 CARB Moyer Program Guidelines, which includes Chapter 5, Off-Road Equipment, Chapter 6, Locomotives, Chapter 7, Marine Vessels, and Chapter 9, Lawn and Garden Equipment Replacement. We'll then go over the next steps in the public process, including how to reach us. Following the presentation, we will open it up for a Q&A session and conclude our public meeting. Now let's begin with an overview of the CARB Moyer Memorial Air Quality Standards Attainment Program, more commonly known as the CARB Moyer Program, or simply the Moyer Program. Established in 1998, the CARB Moyer Program is the longest-running incentive program at the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, and has recently undergone a comprehensive guideline update in October 2024. The Moyer Program is implemented locally through partnerships with California's 35 air districts and provides a broad range of eligible project types across 8 source categories that achieve permanent, surplus, quantifiable, and enforceable cost-effective emission reductions. We are taking the opportunity today to present to you the proposed targeted updates to the 2024 guidelines. These proposed changes aim to clarify and expand funding opportunities for zero-emission projects, align the 2024 guidelines with recent CARB regulatory developments, address feedback received from stakeholders, and ensure continued commitment with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N2725. CARB Moyer Program staff recommends targeted updates to Chapters 5, 6, 7, and 9 of the 2024 CARB Moyer Program Guidelines to improve district implementation and align with recent CARB regulations, Executive Order N2725, and stakeholder feedback. These updates aim to address the absence of U.S. EPA authorizations, expand zero-emission project eligibility, and respond to district feedback. Following the public process, staff will finalize these updates under CARB's Executive Officer Authority granted by Board Resolution 2124 to ensure clarity and regulatory alignment. In the following slides, we'll discuss the proposed changes, chapter by chapter. Please note, As we do understand that there are additional regulatory actions that may impact other chapters in the Moyer Program Guidelines, this public meeting here today focuses on targeted updates to the off-road source categories as seen here in this slide. First up is Chapter 5. We will highlight the proposed changes to the off-road equipment chapter. We know that many fleets and businesses are taking steps to reduce emissions ahead of deadlines or before certain regulations apply to them. To support transparency and consistency in how we evaluate CARB Moyer program projects, we've developed a definition for what we're calling voluntary action. This definition helps clarify eligibility for projects that didn't receive a waiver or authorization, received only a partial waiver or authorization, or didn't submit for a waiver or authorization at all from the US EPA. Voluntary action refers to the decision made by a fleet or entity to proactively align with a regulation before it's legally required. This means the entity isn't currently subject to the regulation, or the regulation hasn't yet received a waiver or authorization from the US EPA. It is important to emphasize that this kind of action is entirely at the discretion of the entity. These actions are completely optional and are not legally required, but they do show initiative and a commitment to cleaner air. We're recognizing these voluntary actions as proactive steps that can help reduce emissions ahead of regulatory timelines. By defining voluntary action, we can better support projects that didn't receive a waiver, only got a partial waiver, or didn't submit one yet still make proactive choices to reduce emissions. This helps us recognize and fund early action while keeping the program fair and consistent for everyone. We want to make sure that fleets and businesses who are doing the right thing before they have to can be considered for funding under the Moyer program. We are excited to share updates that expand funding opportunities for fleets taking voluntary action to align with CARB's zero-emission regulations and programs. This means that fleets who choose to transition early can now access additional support through the CARB Moyer program. First, we're introducing an optional cost share plus-up. This allows for up to a 15% increase in funding for eligible projects that are voluntarily aligning with zero-emission regulations. Second, we're giving air districts more flexibility to fund zero-emission projects, especially those related to the upcoming zero-emission forklift or ZEF regulation. This helps districts better support fleets that are taking initiative. For projects who are taking voluntary actions for ZEF regulation projects, we're allowing funding for these voluntary zero-emission projects up to the maximum project life at zero at the district's discretion. And finally, we're enabling up to the maximum eligible incentive amount. These updates ensure that fleets making early transitions can access the full level of support available under the program. Together, these changes recognize and reward early action, helping us accelerate clean air goals while supporting fleets that are leading the way. Next, we want to highlight an important update related to the Airborne Toxic Control Measure for in-use diesel-fueled transport refrigeration units, or TRUs. This regulation received a partial waiver from the US EPA, which means not all parts of the regulations were approved. As a result, we're updating how we support zero-emission TRU projects under the CARB Moyer program. Specifically, we're removing the phase-in compliance schedule for zero-emission truck TRU fleets, which was previously shown in Table 5-8. That portion did not receive approval, so it's no longer part of the regulatory framework. The good news is that this change creates an opportunity. Because those projects are no longer required under the regulations, they are now considered surplus. To support this, we're expanding district flexibility to fund zero-emission TRU projects that are being implemented voluntarily. These projects can now be funded up to the maximum project life. We're also allowing funding up to the maximum eligible incentive amount, ensuring that fleets make early, voluntary transitions and can access the full level of support available. This is a great example of how we're adapting to regulatory changes while continuing to support early action and clean technology adoption. Next, we will highlight the proposed changes to the Locomotives chapter. CARB adopted the in-use locomotive regulation in April 2023 to reduce emissions from locomotives operating in California. However, the regulation was repealed in June 2025 through Board Resolution 25-4 following the withdrawal of CARB's request for a Clean Air Act authorization from the US EPA. As a result of the repeal, revisions to the Chapter 6 of the 2024 Moyer Program Guidelines are necessary. These updates aim to remove references to the repealed regulation, clarify funding eligibility, and update project criteria for locomotive projects. Proposed changes would remove in-use operational requirements, resulting in additional funding opportunities for locomotive projects with longer project lives, up to the maximum 15-year project life while maintaining a minimum 1-year project life. Partial year project lives were introduced to help maximize the surplus period until the regulation's effectiveness date. With the repeal of the regulation, partial year project lives are no longer necessary and therefore removed, thereby simplifying program administration. Additionally, locomotive replacement projects with an aggregate engine power rating of 1,006 horsepower or 750 kilowatts or greater must now be certified by the US EPA and verified by CARB to meet Tier 4 locomotive emission standards. This proposed change reinstates the CARB verification requirement, which was removed from the 2024 guidelines following the adoption and subsequent repeal of the in-use locomotive regulation. Please note that the requirement for zero-emission locomotives to have CARB verification or approval does not change. Now we will highlight the proposed changes to the Marine Vessels chapter. In the Marine Vessels chapter, we were looking to provide funding flexibilities as a response to the partial waivers for impacted vessel types. We did this by expanding funding for short-run ferries using Tier 4 final and zero-emission technology projects. Additionally, in order to promote the support of zero-emission technology, we have added an optional cost share plus-up of up to 15% for fleets voluntarily going zero-emission. Our goal is that these updates positively impact the marine community. And finally, we will highlight the proposed changes to the Lawn and Garden Equipment Replacement chapter. For the Lawn and Garden Equipment Replacement chapter, one important goal is improving access for landscaping businesses. There was an issue raised by Senator Stern's office in November of 2024. They flagged that CARB's requirement for business licenses may block access for many informal landscaping companies. CARB's core program, modeled another way, using flexible proof-like dealer attestations and business cards. This has helped informal businesses qualify and show that flexibility works. We are committed to realigning our CARB Moyer Program license requirement in this update by enabling the determination of commercial eligibility to be completed at the local air district level. We also took this opportunity to clarify the language around the bulk purchasing option. The bulk purchases option is for commercial and public fleets only. Bulk purchases are limited to commercial businesses and public agencies and must be purchased via agreements made by an air district in partnership with equipment manufacturers or dealers. For the next steps in this public process, the 45-day public comment period will close on February 16, 2026. So please submit comments by then if you intend to do so. You may also submit public comments directly to the Moyer Program inbox at moyerhelp@arb.ca.gov. This concludes the end of our presentation on the proposed revisions to the 2024 CARB Moyer Program Guidelines for off-road equipment, locomotives, marine vessels, and lawn and garden equipment replacement. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the contacts listed in this slide. And with that, we can open it up to the public comment session of this meeting. Now we will take questions, suggestions, and comments. We welcome your feedback on the information we have presented here today. I will now hand it off to Wasim Ali and Joseph Wang to facilitate this public comment session.
Thank you, Mia. Please raise your hand using the raise hand feature or type your question in the chat. We will address questions one at a time in the order they are received. For those who raise their hand, I will invite you to unmute. When speaking, please state your name and affiliation before asking your question. I will now review all raised hands. I'll give it a minute for folks to raise their hand, and then I will see how many folks have their hands raised. We have first person. Give me a second. Ken, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, this is Ken Frankie. I'm president of the Sport Fishing Association of California. Question I constantly, and it's not really covered here, maybe something for off topic, but we frequently have people ask if there's an extension been given any one of the companies in California that have commercial passenger fishing vessels. Are they allowed to apply for CARB Moyer funding if they have an extension, say to 2027 or what have you? If it's offline, no problem, but if somebody's available to answer that question, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hi, Ken. I met you before. This is Vicky. Yeah, so if fleets do have extensions, they're still eligible for CARB Moyer funding.
Okay, you broke up there one more time. Yeah, was the answer yes, they could apply?
Yes, they can apply if they have an extension. So I'll nod just in case.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Of course.
I don't see any additional hands raised, but I know we have some questions. Now we do have one more person. Jaime, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jamie Diamond. I have charter passenger fishing vessels, and I have a question. If are the extensions that Mr. Frankie just spoke about, so people want to sell or buy a CPFV that may have an extension, are those transferable? Because so like if somebody buys a vessel that has an extension for compliance, if somebody buys that vessel, gets new ownership, does that extension transfer with the vessel?
Actually, Jamie, could you, we'll take it down, and if maybe I can reach out to you, or you can email it to Moyer Help. We want to check with the reg team for that.
Okay.
Be able to speak on their behalf. But if that's okay with you, then we'll happily answer that.
That's
Sorry.
fine.
I turned on my mic and I'm in the room, so that's why there was feedback. Hi, I'm Tessie Cat, I'm the branch chief over the Moyer program. And so to answer that question is more, the better bet is to actually, you have, as a transfer of ownership, you should register and inform the regulatory staff. And that exemption, they'll tell you, they'll probably issue a new exemption letter, given there's probably a new fleet and owner name. Those specifics have changed. But it would still be applicable. Yeah.
And then with that, numerous vessels applied for Moyer funding at the outset of trying to become compliant with the rule to get to tier 3 in a timely manner. And because of the small window before there was all the extensions available, we did not get what we otherwise normally would have got in Moyer funding. We got a significantly lesser dollar amount, less funding, because the compliance window was so small once the tier 3 rule was set in place. Is there any mechanism to essentially, I guess, reimburse for the out-of-pocket costs that we otherwise would have got because of the accelerated deadline?
No, I don't think that that's possible at all. It just, I mean, no, I don't think so, because we follow what's exactly on the rule and those exemptions. We can't do anything about that since that's what was adopted by the board.
So even though vessels can get it with a extension, not complying further out, those of us that did it early didn't get the full funding that we normally would have got.
Like a reimbursement amount for what would have been possible? No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
Next hand that I see is it Cherie Hall? I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Go ahead. I believe you're unmuted. Are you able to ask your question, or should we come back to you? We can come back to you. Next up, I'm going to ask Jim to unmute.
Yes, actually, I have several questions. If that's okay, I can come.
That's fine. We can come back as well. Trying to see if we can, Joseph, I know we have quite a few questions raised through the chat feature, so let me pass it to you to go over those, and then we'll come back to the folks that are left with their hands raised.
Okay.
Joseph, so
Sure.
Go ahead.
The first one we have is from Harold Holmes. He wants to know, without knowing how long this update will be applicable, should this update to locomotive guidelines recognize that the 1998 Locomotives South Coast MOU provision, Class 1 railroads will sunset January 1st of 2030. Do you want to answer this question live?
Yes, thank you, Harold, for your question. Yes, so in this update, we still have the MOU, the South Coast MOU in place. That has not changed. And those requirements for the Class 1 railroad operators remain in place.
Okay. All right. The second question we have is from Rich Blaston. Sorry if I got that wrong. Would you have a sense of how much funding in dollars these chapters would possibly be available? Who would like to answer that one?
Thank
Thank you, Tess.
Technical issues, so forgive me, but I'll answer that because we don't really know what those dollar figures would be for these updates because it's all up to local discretion in terms of how they prioritize and move forward with the funding decisions for the local air districts. It just opens up the door to various opportunities based on the update of based on what happened with the regulations.
Thank you, Tess. And we'll go on to the next one. We have from Robert Nixon. Will you be handling questions submitted to marshals prior to this meeting? I believe the answer.
Hi, Rob. Can you guys hear me okay? This is Rhonda.
Yes.
Hi, I'm the manager of the Locomotive chapter. And Robert, I do recall that that one of our staff has got back to you on your questions that came through our Moyer help to Marshall. So if you have any other follow-up on a specific project, either myself, Mia can help you in terms of, any other follow-up or any other questions you might have. So thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. The next question we have is from Andrew Fox. What is the purpose of requiring both EPA certification and CARB verification for locomotives, which would seem to be a redundant requirement? Mia, do you want to answer that?
Hi, Andrew. So our team here at the Moyer program, we coordinate and collaborate with our TTD division, toxics, and transportation division. Thank you, Tess. So with collaboration with them, we decided to reinstate the requirement for the CARB verification. So it was initially removed after the in-use locomotive regulation was adopted. But since that regulation has been repealed, the reason for its exclusion no longer applies. So we understand that there are many benefits to CARB verification that are not included in the EPA certification process. So we also have ensured that locomotives will meet the emission performances required based on technically feasible standards. And if Ken Bati or Rhonda has any other additions to add?
I think that generally covers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Let's see. Do we want to check if Jim, he still has his hand raised, if he's able to ask his question now?
Yes. So one of the questions pertains to differentiating programs for converting diesel and propane forklifts to all electric.
Hi, Jim. This is Miriam Sandoval here. I am the lead staff over the off-road category. For diesel versus propane, diesel forklifts would be subject to the off-road and use diesel regulation versus the propane ones would be subject to the zero-emission forklift. So these updates are aiming to assist with the transition of those propane or natural gas LSI forklifts to zero emission. Does that answer your question?
Are there certain guidelines, for example, on the diesel as to whether or not older diesels already or cannot be applied for as a result of their age, that they had to have been compliant already?
So for any diesel equipment that is subject to the in-use off-road regulation, we do require that these fleets report through doors, and we go off of the doors snapshot to ensure that we are funding equipment that is compliant. So we want to fund those pieces of equipment that are going to be surplus. So either you're doing it early or going beyond what you're required to do by the regulation. So if there are really old diesel equipment that the regulation has not required them to phase them out yet, those would be considered surplus. But if they are not meeting their requirement through the in-use off-road regulation, then those would not be eligible for replacement.
And that relates to predominantly to fleet size, et cetera?
Yes, yes. So we have a small, medium, or large fleets. But we can, if you have, I can, if my email is on the slide, if you did need me to like get you in contact with your local air district to see what opportunities are available for your fleet.
Okay, and that was just in part. Will these slides be available online?
Yes, they will be posted on our meetings and workshops page of the Carl Moyer program after this meeting ends.
Okay. The other question in regard to locomotives and 15-year life for the 1,006 brake horsepower classification or 750 kW and above. So we're saying that under Carl Moyer, the restriction previously under the end use locomotive regulation order limited the commitment period. And now we're back to 15-year life. Is there also a 15% incentive or not?
I will pass this locomotive question over to our locomotive lead, Mia Hunt. But thank you for your question and feel free to reach out if you need assistance with the off-road chapter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Do you mind repeating that question? I apologize.
So the locomotives, as a result of the end-use locomotive regulation order being unwound, if you will, and now because that affected obviously previous applications in terms of the funding, because they're very reduced lives, right, with Carl Moyer in the last 2 to 3 years. So now we're back to 15-year life. And again, that goes to the 1,006 brake horsepower and above, right? So if, as an example, a client, an end use user of locomotives wants to go into Tier 4 under the Carl Moyer program, is there also an incentive where with match funding they can go up to 100% funding? Because Carl Moyer, I think, is 85, is the 15%, which seems to be applicable in some different categories. Does it also apply to locomotives?
No, that does not apply to locomotives. So with the locomotives chapter in the 2024 guideline update, we did increase the maximum grant amount that we had previously had in the 2017 guidelines. So those increases that we had in the 2024 guideline updates will remain unchanged. So that there is an increase, and it does fund the Tier 4 or cleaner units, which also includes the zero-emission locomotives as well. So for Class 1 and Class 2 line haul, project types would receive up to a maximum of 80%. Class 3 switcher and passenger up to a maximum of 85%.
And if they happen to be in a DAC, does that raise the 85%?
At this time, we do not have additional plus-ups, but it's something that we can take and consider for future program guideline changes.
And for zero emission, because there does seem to be some viable opportunities other than pilots and prototypes, at least in the smaller horsepower classes. Is there any change in that funding percent? Because obviously the zero emission at this point in time with the technology is considerably above the costs of Tier 4 diesels. Any particular opportunities exist for higher funding percentage for zero emission locomotives?
At this time, we have it is not included with this guideline update for the 2024 update regarding the changes in the regulatory development in the in the regulatory environment space that we are in right now. But it's something that we can take and discuss and for potential future updates.
Okay. And the zero emission, Andrew Fox had brought that up as a redundancy between EPA and CARB. And I certainly, having been involved in that in the past, understand the differences. It's much more thorough, quite frankly, with the CARB verification than what's required by the EPA for Tier 4. But having said that, the CARB verification that's been in place prior to the in-use locomotive regulation order, does that remain unchanged? In other words, for going into Tier 4 locomotive applications, if the engine and or locomotive models have been previously certified by CARB or verified by CARB, do those still apply, or do they have to restart that process?
No, I think that we'll go back and we'll check with the regulatory staff, because my guess is that if verification is implemented similar as certification, that's done on a regular basis. And the process is not changing in terms of being redefined. It's just more the, like you said, the current applicability of an existing verification. That's what we'll double check for you.
Okay.
We can also put you in touch with that certification unit as well, Jim.
Okay. The other thing is that, again, to improve opportunities for or getting, whether it be Tier 4 or zero emission product out in the field, CORE through the CalSTART governance has been exceptional in a lot of ways because it's incremental, doesn't require the destruction of existing piece of equipment. But when it's stacked, I wanted to clarify, CORE can be stacked, we're assuming, with VW and or stacked with Prop 1B. Is that and also Carl Moyer, those three, CORE can be stacked with all three of those. Is that correct?
So for co-funding with Carl Moyer, should that be the case for your project, we would refer you to the air district in which you are applying to, because we do work with our other incentive partners to ensure that any projects that are being co-funded can meet all the requirements for each of the different incentive programs.
Okay, but you're referring that back to the local air district, but CARB obviously has an overreach on that. You know, do they apply by CARB standards? And we understand the fact that you have to complete the requirements of each of those. So if one has some additional guideline requirements in addition to Carl Moyer and in addition to Prop 1B or VW, but because it seems to get mixed up a little bit to going to different air districts, is there a statement that can be made today by CARB that says, yes, you can co-fund with CORE with those three different programs?
So Jim, those programs, we don't really cover all those programs, but this is what I'll tell you is that generally speaking, you can co-fund as long as you've said in that each of the individual programmatic requirements. The one that I'm not sure about specifically is VW, given that it was a legal mandate for emission reductions. So there might be an issue with VW, but we'll double check that for you. CORE does not have that limitation, but VW may specifically.
Okay, just as information from a couple different air districts, statements have been made that VW with CORE is permissible, but VW with Prop 1B or VW with Carl Moyer is not permissible. Is that an accurate statement?
Tess, can I jump in here for this one?
Yes, please do.
So we have co-funded with VW, but we do that on a case-by-case basis. And that's because VW does claim those NOx emission reductions and Moyer does as well. So we do have to do it on a case-by-case because we have to apportion the emission reductions based on how much money is coming in from VW and how much is coming in from Moyer.
Okay, and does that also apply under Prop 1B?
So go ahead.
For Prop 1B, there have been in the past, and I think that those restrictions still apply. It's primarily there's not a lot of Prop 1B funds available, but in general, there's been limitations on co-funding with Prop 1B and Moyer in the past. We'll confirm with the Prop 1B staff if that's still the case, but I think generally speaking, at least my recollection is that we have not done co-funding with Prop 1B. And like I said, primarily, and I think Mia was getting to this, it's primarily the priority of the Moyer program to achieve surplus emission reductions. And when there's districts or district-run programs and timing issues, you used CORE as an example. Sometimes that creates challenges in terms of getting the funding such that it's coordinated with both on the admin side with the air districts and with the other programs. But we're happy to get back to you and confirm on some of those questions to be more specific. I also did want to highlight that we do have a co-funding webpage that I don't know if it's in the chat or if there's information that we can share with you directly, but we do have that available where we've had some policy determinations and guidance on different programs in terms of asking and answering those questions regarding co-funding.
So that would, you say that is on the Carl Moyer webpage?
I believe there's a link to the page there. And like I said, I apologize. I will see if we can share it in some way, or if not, we'll get back to you and make sure we send it out to you.
Yeah, that'd be great, Rhonda. So then the last question I had, and it makes it a little more touchy. We understand with all the changes occurring in 2025, there's been delays in processing existing applications. And what's occurred is that in the co-funding with CORE program, many of the applications going in for several of the programs, whether it be VW, Prop 1B, Carl Moyer, have been delayed. And the issue is that once the voucher is released to the manufacturer, then that starts the clock at actually when the inquiry occurs. The clock starts and you go 12 months. And that's when you have to complete your project with CORE. You can request, and Nestor Losa out of CORE program has been very good about that, getting a 8-month extension. But predominantly the extension is not from the manufacturers. It's actually because in 2025 we've had these issues. And so a lot of these were in limbo and some still waiting clarification for processing. Is there a blanket that can be issued to CORE that says because of these issues, these extensions may have to go beyond the 12 plus 8, which is 20 months, because CORE now is coming back saying we can't go beyond 20 months. And yet the holdup is not the manufacturer, it's the holdup of processing the applications. Because you can't, CORE can reserve the voucher, but you cannot actually claim the voucher by the manufacturer until you've already counter-executed a Carl Moyer, VW, or Prop 1B application, because it states very specifically you can't pre-order the equipment. And what we are running across in several instances, not just one or two, issues with CORE because we're going beyond that 20 months, and CORE is coming back saying we need justification just to get the 8-month extension. And the real issue there is the processing of existing applications. So what my real question is, can there be a blanket made in light of the circumstances that we've all been through in 2025 to allow CORE to extend that? And it's because of, again, not being able to complete existing applications in the other 3 programs.
Yeah, we can't really speak to the CORE program, Jim, but because they were specifically focused on the Moyer program, but we'll relate your comments to them, as well as you should contact them directly. But some of your other comments will definitely look forward to furthering that discussion, the Moyer discussion pieces with a 2026 guideline update, like the in lieu of cost share for zero emission technology. That's something that we can address in the Moyer program.
Okay. Yeah, the emphasis on the core is that a lot of these, and there's been a lot of time, money, resources spent in getting the applications completed, et cetera. And in the process, though, if we don't have the core funding, it's going to nix, and they're going to reject they, meaning the end user, is going to say, we can't afford to do the deal. And so there'll be a lot of loss of equipment opportunities unless we get some resolution with that, quite frankly.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Jim. Next person, Vladimir, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me very well?
Yes.
All right. My name is Vladimir Karimov. I'm an Energy Solutions Manager with Papay Material Handling. I have two questions. One is about the interpretation of the surplus, and the second one is about the timing. So for the first question, Chapter 5, draft document, Section H, subsection 1 reads the following. Eligible funding must provide at least 1 year of emission reductions surplus to the LSI fleet regulation, and if subject to the zero-emission forklift regulation, with a corresponding minimum project life of at least 1 year. Does that mean that I now have two scenarios? So I have a public agency and a private entity. Does that mean that with this statement that the entity has to be 1 year in terms of the public agency, that they have to be 1 year in advance of scheduled phase out of their existing old equipment, and the private agency would not have to be, or would have to be? That's the question.
Hi, Vladimir. This is Miriam Sandoval again, the off-road category lead for Chapter 5. I did want to refer you to the zero-emission forklift regulation implementation update that was posted on May 29th, 2025. Per that implementation update, CARB staff are not going to be enforcing the regulation against any privately owned or operated fleets. So when we look at H1A, we're saying that a fleet that is public would be subject to that phase out schedule, versus a privately owned fleet would not be subject to the phase out schedule. So that is where we are allowing that maximum incentive amount at district discretion and maximum project life. But for that public fleet, they will be subject to the phase out schedule, and they do have to have at least 1 year of surplus available. So at least 1 year early.
Got it. For public fleet, I understand, and then I lost the connection briefly for the private fleet. So for the private fleet, they don't have to be on a phase out schedule at all. So any their action would be considered a surplus. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. However, if they do choose to follow the phase out schedule, that is where that cost share plus up for voluntary action does come into play.
I see. Thank you. My second question is about the timing. So if these adjustments to the guidelines, if they do take effect, when does that start?
So we do have to wait for the public process to end. So we are going to be accepting comments into February. Once the comment period ends, that is where on our end, on the Moyer side, we have to evaluate the public comments, make any necessary changes, and then through our executive officers, he would be the one that would approve our update. So I can't give you a day and time, but I can tell you that we are going to be working as fast as we can, but it might come into like maybe around March. And Mia, please feel free to chime in on that one.
Thanks, Marian. Your assessment is correct regarding the timeline. So just please look forward to the Carl Moyer Guidelines webpage where we post all of our updated guidelines for all the different chapters discussed here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph, I'm not seeing any more raised hands, so I'm going to pass it back to you to go over the other questions that have been typed in the chat.
Gotcha. Lily Whiteman would like us to go back to the marine vessel slide if possible. So I will. There we go. And then I'll move on to the next person. James Dumont has a question for marine projects involving a vessel that is operating under an extension. Is the maximum project life calculated at the end date of that extension, or should the maximum project life be calculated as the CHE regulation terminal year for being able to receive an extension? Right now, it seems the maximum project life is subjective and could change while a call Moyer proposal is under review. Should CARB issue extension during district review period? Mia, would you like to answer this?
Hi, James. Thank you for your question. Just to let you know, it's up to the air districts, and they're the ones that would consider the applicant's proposed compliance extensions when they're evaluating projects and determining project life. So as long as the extension is approved prior to the contract execution date, but like I initially said, you want to check with the air district you're applying with too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tree Hall apparently doesn't have a microphone, so that's why we will be answering your questions. He's wondering if anyone could walk him through the application process. That would be the air districts. But he did have a question regarding, we have a water well drilling company, and there is no zero emission options being built for what we do. So we are trying to figure out the what and how. I attempted to get into the program last year, but it didn't get funded. And the person I was speaking to had no idea what our rig would fall under.
Thanks, Joseph. I could take that one.
Gotcha.
So, again, this is Miriam Sandoval, lead staff over Chapter 5 over the off-road category. If you could please get in contact with me, my email, if you guys could put that slide back up. If you could please get in contact with me, I can help you get in touch with our regulatory staff to ensure like what are your regulatory requirements, and I can also get you in touch with your air district just so that we're all on the same page on what would be the eligible equipment that for the replacement side. So I'd love to help and figure out what if there are any zero emission options available to you.
Thank you, Miriam.
Yeah.
The next question we have is from Judy Lung. For future guideline updates, would CARB consider flexibility on scrappage with cargo handling equipment, i.e. no scrapping, delay scrapping until equipment deployed for a year, ability to sell out of state / basin? Vicky, would you want to hand to that, or Miriam?
All right. I could take that one, Joseph.
Gotcha.
So with our 2024 updates, we actually did add a delay in scrappage for zero emission technology. For future guideline updates, we are always taking in, your guys' feedback. What is it that you guys do want to see in there? And on the Moyer side, we take it back and see what's feasible, what are we allowed to add or not add. So thank you for your comment. Right now, for the delayed scrappage, that is already in there. And for future guideline updates, we will look into no scrapping. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that is all the questions we had. I did see a hand pop up slightly before, but disappeared. So right now we have no questions.
Thank you, Wasim and Joseph. There are no further questions at this time. Should we give it a couple more minutes for anyone who is trigger shy at the raised hands or Q&A chat session?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any. Actually, we just
There's
had
a
one
hand.
person just raise their hand. Scott Wilson, go ahead. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Scott Wilson with El Dorado County Air Quality Management District. I'm sorry, I was kind of back and forth between calls, so I might have missed this, but on the Carl Moyer Lawn and Garden, we were wondering if there is any movement on possibly adding snow blowers, and rototillers are another one we get a lot of requests for up here in the hills. Wondering if that was something you might consider for funding in the lawn and garden equipment, zero emission lawn and garden equipment.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for the question. It's certainly something that we're taking a look at. It's something to consider. I think that would be something we could discuss for the 2026 guideline update, whereas this is more meant to address either regulations without waivers or sort of targeted updates to the language for Chapter 9, but it's certainly something to consider.
Okay, thank you.
We have one more person. Irene, I'm going to allow you to go ahead and mute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good morning. Tyrone Bell from Monterey. Just a quick question on lawn and garden. Is there going to be any considerations to adjust the incentive amounts based on current market prices?
For the 2025 update, no. Going forward for 2026, if when that process begins, those are certainly comments we'd like to hear. If you think the incentive amount is too high as prices are coming down on the equipment, or if they're too low, yeah, we could definitely entertain that conversation. Feel free to reach out to me if you have thoughts and ideas at my email for the 2026 process. For 2025, what we've presented is what we're considering.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Wasim, and thank you, Joseph. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. As a reminder, the public comment period closes February 16th, 2026. Please submit those comments either directly to one of us here or at our Moyer Help inbox at moyerhelp@arb.ca.gov. And this will conclude our public meeting. Thank you so much, everyone.